Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies today? Anybody substituting? No?
There's apologies from Councillor Sam Davey, and Councillor Sudan will be substituting for him.
Okay, all right. Welcome to committee, Councillor Dan. No. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, please? Anybody? No declarations? Okay. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. You have been circulated them. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true record? Is that agreed? Agreed. Item 4 is Chair's urgent business. There is no Chair's urgent business. That brings us on to item 5, questions from members of the public. I don't believe there are.
There's no questions from the public.
No. Okay, thank you. Item 6 brings us on to planning applications. Members should be aware that the third item on your agenda has been withdrawn. 6.3 22B Woodside, that has been withdrawn. So that brings us on to 6.1 58 Shore Way. And Mike Stone is the case officer, will present this application. Oh yeah, can I just, because there are quite a number of people here, could make sure everybody's phones are switched off, please, or at least on silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application comes before the committee, having been called in by the Assistant Director due to public interest reasons and finding balanced policy issues. 58 Shore Way is an end terrace dwelling at the end of a cul-de-sac on the Mountbatten Peninsula. Properties in the terrace have upper level recessed balconies, and on the middle level small projecting balconies. In June of this year, the applicant submitted an application for 2 replacement balconies at the higher level and middle level that would have wrapped around the property to the rear elevations. This application was refused under delegated authority on the 25th of July on the grounds of adverse impact on the quality of the terrace and loss of neighbour privacy. On the 31st of August, the applicant submitted the current application, which is for a replacement balcony on the middle level and a porch canopy on the side door. The balcony would project forward 1.5 metres and would be constructed of clear glass and chrome with an obscure glazed privacy screen. The porch would be UPVC, white UPVC and glass. 24 letters of objection have been received. 8 letters of support have been received as well. The letters of objection raise the following points: loss of views, loss of light, overlooking, loss of privacy, insufficient details, unwelcome precedent, lack of room, increase in noise, same as previously refused application, out of keeping, out of scale, visible from the southwest coastal footpath, will devalue properties in the area, possible subdivision in future, porch will be very visible, porch materials are out of keeping. Loss of views, property values and views from the south-west coastal footpath are not material considerations, so do not inform the decision. Letters of support said that the proposal would enhance the area and improve the appearance of the building. This is a view taken from the applicant's side balcony at the middle level, where the balcony would go. As you can see, there's already significant levels of mutual overlooking at the front. So case officers do not consider that there would be any significant harm from the balcony at the front of the property. At the side, it's possible to look down into the neighbours' private gardens and across to their balcony. The case officer requested a privacy screen as a way of reducing this overlooking and improving the privacy for both parties. It is accepted that the introduction of the privacy screen will have an impact on the neighbour in terms of visual appearance and restrictions of their view to the side, although it should be borne in mind that views are not a material planning consideration. In response to further letters of objection, an amendment was negotiated that reduce the depth of the balcony from 2 metres to 1.5 metres. Case officers consider that this is a reasonable compromise between privacy and the appearance of the area. The balcony would be visible from Shore Way, but the use of the glass and the reduced size of the development compared to the previous application means that the case officer considers that it would have an adverse impact on the area. It is accepted that approval would establish a precedent for these types of balconies, but the case officer does not consider that this would be a detrimental impact on the street scene due to the way that the terrace sets back just past this property here. The balcony would be located on the north elevation of the terrace with the building behind it, and for these reasons the case officer does not consider that there are any significant loss of light or overbearing concerns. The scale of development is considerably reduced from the earlier refused application, and over the course of the application the case officer has negotiated a series of amendments to further reduce the impact. These include the addition of a privacy screen, reduction in the size of the balcony, reduction in the size of the porch to a small canopy, conditioning the materials to be used, and a condition requiring the privacy screen to be in place before the balcony can be used. The MPPF states that our default position for decision makers is to approve sustainable development, and in the absence of strong refusal reasons, the case officer recommends the application for conditional approval. Chair, there's also an addendum to this report. Since the report was written, 2 additional letters of objection have been received that refer to the fact that the previous application was very similar and was refused, and lack of information on the porch. These points have been addressed in the report and do not alter the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. We have 3 speakers on this particular application. First one being Councillor Ken Foster, who is speaking as Ward Councillor for the area. Councillor Foster, if you'd like to come down and make yourself at home. You obviously know the format. You have 5 minutes from when you start. We will remind you 1 minute before the end of that period. Okay.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I won't probably need the 5 minutes, but can I start off by saying that I find it very strange that this application was turned down recently, and except for the half a metre in depth, the policies haven't changed. So that's confusing to me. I do differ with and obviously the case officer's got the right to say it won't affect the visual, the appearance of the building. I disagree with that, but that's up to the planning committee. They obviously read through. But I would like the committee to concentrate on CS2 and 34 and look at in detail the effects of what some of the case officers have said. But if I can, I wish in a way that more people had gone yesterday on a site visit, because many a time I've sat in here looking at drawings, and unless yesterday, if people had gone down, I understand they got other tasks to do and it's not so easy. But when I got down yesterday and visited both 58 and 59, I thought, well, there's something not quite right. So anyone sitting, I can't understand why all the balconies in that building been designed years ago, a lovely little village opening. I can't understand why everyone else got the same size balcony, quite happy, and this now, if it goes through today, the person in 59 can only look straight forward to see the sea. They can't look left because there'll be a screen. They can't look down and see the road outside. They can't see any of the boats coming into the marina. So to me, there's something erratically wrong. It is the same size, which the size of that balcony is the same as in the original. So, you know, it wasn't even reduced in size. So I'm really disappointed that accusation that they say is detrimental to the street scene. It is not. And if this is going to send a precedent to all the buildings in that area. So in effect, everybody could have a balcony. So do we want to destroy a lovely outlook for everybody? Some people may not be able to afford to have a balcony. If it happens all the way along, you'll have some people looking out the window, others can't look out the window. So, Chair, I'll leave it to that. There's another speaker, and I'm quite happy to let someone else speak on this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Foster. The next speaker we have is Mr. Richard Banks, who is objecting to the application. Mr. Banks, would you like to come down and... Right. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Banks. As you probably are aware, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. We will remind you 1 minute before the end of that time.
Thank you.
So whenever you're ready, that's fine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Banks, and I represent the objectors to the application of 58 Shore Way. My wife and I are the most affected by this application as we live next door. Our houses are in a private road, and we are a small, friendly community with only 23 homes. All of the residents, apart from the applicant, strongly objected to this application. Much thought has gone into the design of the small walk-on balconies on the second floor of each of these properties. This was not an accidental design. This was done for a reason, to preserve the overlooking, shadowing, and privacy. Each house is able to appreciate equally the amenity that is available. The first application was submitted and refused. This was a unanimous decision by the planning team. The second application was submitted just for the second floor balcony, but with exactly the same dimensions as before. I'd like to read out here a few comments made by the planning to refuse this application, which were directed at the 2-metre balcony. The proposal would bring the balcony 2 metres closer to the houses opposite, with a significant and harmful increase in overlooking and loss of privacy. The balcony would result in the users being able to see into number 59 living space and would cause overshadowing of the amenity at the rear. Privacy screens can sometimes be a method of overcoming these outlooking issues. It is considered the addition of a privacy screen would only add to the impression of a bulky and out of character addition. The officer stated the real elevation of the terrace is most noticeable and have the characteristics of a principal elevation. This part of the terrace is clearly visible from the neighbouring properties in Shore Way and the coastal path. Given the size of the balcony, it would have an adverse impact by virtue of its size and the attending support posts, and will affect the overall quality of the terrace and the visual amenity of the area. Its size makes it clearly overbearing and at odds with the design of the development and the sense of unity of the old terrace. The applicant then made a last-minute change, merely altering the depth of the balcony from 2 to 1.5 metres, adding a 1.9 metre high privacy screen. Let's be clear on this. We are still talking about a 750% increase from the present size of the balcony. We should now ask, why is a 1.5 metre balcony and privacy screen under discussion when a 2 metre deep balcony and privacy screen was turned down? This is just not consistent by accepting it now. The 45-degree ruling, this still applies and was ignored and contravened. Sunlight in our terrace. We face a steep cliff face with many large trees stopping direct sunlight throughout the year. At the rear of our property, we get minimum direct sunlight, and that is only late to early evening throughout the year. This application will cause us to lose our sunset for the entire year, and no sunlight will enter the rear of 59 at any time. The recently erected 2-metre fence has already taken most of our sunshine light away, leaving us without sunlight at all and creating a much darker and overshadowed courtyard. In conclusion, I would like to make the following 7 points. Our human rights are being compromised, and we are at risk of losing our privacy and amenities. This is just not a visual problem, but could lead to intensifying the use of the enlarged balcony. This would have an extremely depressing impact on us. All we ask is to live in peace with all of our neighbours, which we have done up until now. The reduction in depth of the balcony and the addition of an opaque screen, 300mm closer to our patio door. We are left with our amenity being destroyed, living in the shadow without sunshine, while 58 will still be able to achieve all of this.
1 minute remaining.
It's incredulous that this application is under review, as all the stated reasons for refusal in the first instance remain the same. This is just not consistent. As a committee member, I would ask you, would you like this next door to you?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Banks. As you will see, members, we have the applicant, Mr Boot, who on this occasion doesn't wish to be webcast, so I have agreed to that. Where is Mr Boot? Is he here? Oh, sorry.
Chair, can I just be clear on your last statement, please? When you say not wish to be webcast, do you mean visually, I would hope, for the sake of transparency?
Yes,
that
visually.
People watching
Yes,
at home
visually,
yeah,
sorry, yes.
people at home will still be able
Yeah.
to hear his words.
Oh, yes,
and
absolutely,
whatever.
sorry,
Thank
yes.
you, thank you.
Yeah. Right, Mr Boot, I don't know, are you using a microphone or are you? No, he's coming down. Oh, you're coming down, right, that's fine, yeah. Right, Mr Boot, welcome to the committee. As you will be aware, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and we do remind you 1 minute before the end of that period. So whenever you're ready, start. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to represent my recent plan application. This is a significantly revised plan application from my earlier application which was turned down. I trust the committee will review my application with fairness, impartiality, and the common sense will prevail. Mr Chairman, I understand your council officers are recommending granting this plan application, and so I won't add to their analysis. In putting together this revised plan application, I have worked closely with the council to sort their advice. I've been very accommodating to their suggestions made by the plan department. Since my original application in April, I have made many alterations to reduce the scale and the proposed several times. Since my original application, I've spoken to many objectors to try to understand their concerns and work hard to overcome them. I have noticed that some households have submitted up to 6 objections per house. Some are word-for-word identical, which questions the integrity and the genuine concerns. I have tried extremely hard to mitigate these objections raised by my neighbours. The concern over privacy has been raised a number of times. The way that the house has been built means that some houses will always overlook other houses. The plan application will make no difference to that fact. The objectors bought their houses knowing they will be overlooked. However, in discussion with the plan department, I have tried to mitigate this by adding a screen similar to other houses in the area. This amendment to my application will only increase the privacy for my neighbours. I have also removed the legs from the porch to reduce the impact. The Bridge restaurant at the top of our street has a balcony which is 3 metres in depth and 12 metres wide. Yacht Haven, ironically, has a balcony which is 2.5 metres depth with 8 metres wide, and the Mask and Rickin office behind the Bridge restaurant is made from containers which also has a large balcony. Many terrace houses in Turnchapel and houses a few streets away have been granted permission for new balconies, some of which up to 4 metres in depth and are in conservation areas. I personally witnessed firsthand the recent horrific events at Grenfell Tower. This caused me to look at my own home in terms of fire safety. All means of escape are at the front of my home, and my current balcony is 0.5 metre in depth, which would not be sufficient enough for my family in an emergency. I believe this adds to why enlarging the current balcony is the right thing to do for my family. My home faces directly north and therefore has no impact to light. This has been agreed independently by the council site visit. In working with the council to keep the balcony in keeping, we've agreed to use chrome and glass as this is the same material as next door. The porch design will match the gable end and use similar materials as other porches in the area. I am confused to why anyone has objected to this, as others have added porches to their properties and as far as I can tell, without any formal permissions. All the houses in Shore Way face the ocean, and therefore there'll be no impact on or loss of views for anyone. there's been an orchestrated attempt by my neighbours to block any attempt to improve my home. Such objections have become personal in nature. If the plan application is not granted, I may need to consider other options. The council planners have confirmed that I could have a single-storey extension as a permitted development. However, I'd rather have a usable, stylish balcony which is in keeping with the area. And in summary, the rear of the houses in Shore Way all face north. It will be in keeping with other houses. There's already
1 minute remaining.
There's already an existing balcony in place. It will actually increase the privacy, and there's precedents already in place. And this will be a better option than a single-storey extension. And that is why I respectfully ask you to support our council's recommendation to grant this application, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boot. Right, I'm going to throw it open to the committee now. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Mike. We've heard about the light and some trees obscuring natural sunlight coming in. I appreciate it is north-facing, but can you clarify just to what extent the balcony or the proposals could be detrimental to neighbouring properties with regards to light, please?
In terms of light, I think our view is that it is at the north, on the north elevation, on the north elevation of the property. There's a 3-storey building behind it. So our view is that there would not be significant harm to light from the addition of the balcony.
Okay, Councillor Pengelly and then Councillor John Riley. Sorry, John. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Another question for you, Mike. You're in the chair this afternoon for this. Can you explain to me, please, exactly why, from the original application which was refused to this which you're recommending we grant, explain exactly the reasons why the modifications satisfy what you think is reasonable and how it addressed the original concerns for when the application was turned down to now that you find them acceptable and are recommended grant, please.
Thank you. If I could just go back to what was proposed originally. So originally there were going to be 2 balconies that would start on the side of the property and would have wrapped round to the rear elevation. They would have caught, the side balconies would have caused considerable new levels of overlooking to the properties on the side behind. And our view was that the impact from the street looking at it would be unacceptable. It would appear it was much too big, much too overbearing, and that was why it was refused. Also, we had concerns about neighbour impact from having the 2 balconies there. As part of the application process, we have post-refusal discussions with applicants to try and iron out the problems that we've identified. As part of those discussions, we agreed that a smaller balcony on the middle level that demonstrated that it did not harm neighbour amenity or the street scene could be acceptable. And that's the position we've arrived at today, following further negotiations throughout the process.
Okay, Councillor Pengelly.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask actually a similar sort of question to that, but also paragraph 10 concerns me because it says in the previous application it was considered that the presence of poles required to support the balconies would appear out of character, and yet in this present application it still does retain the poles, even though it has been reduced to 1.6, but they are still there and they are still visible. That's right, yeah, it has been reduced, but I'm also conscious of the fact that we have approved balconies in other parts of the city that use poles or cantilevers or other types of very visible projections. So that's the reason we have used these things, we have approved these things before. But could I just stress that it said it was considered the presence of the poles to support the balconies would appear out of character? And, you know, with poles being still there now, doesn't that mean it's still out of character? I don't understand
Yeah,
that.
okay. Well, they've been reduced in the sense that there was going to be a second level, and that's gone. It's just going to be 1.6 metres, and I say we have to defend it. If we refuse it, we have to defend this at an appeal, and I'm conscious of the fact that we have approved other balconies elsewhere in the city.
Yep, that's fine. Councillor Stevens first, please.
Thank you. Yeah, could you just go into a little bit more depth, if you can, Mike, in terms of the overlooking or lack thereof? I'm guessing, looking at the map, and I know the area very, very, very slightly, it's the adjoining properties and the other one of the end terrace that we're looking at there. So in terms of what could be seen now without the planning application being implemented and what could be seen with it being implemented, can you just highlight the difference, please?
Thank you. Looking at the front, looking at the rear, heading to the waterfront, there would be no change. At the side, if you were to look down, you'd be able to see into the neighbours' garden and across onto their balcony. If the application were to be approved, there would be the privacy screen would run across there, and that would restrict views into the garden and onto the neighbour's balcony.
And where are we with, because people have touched on precedents and other balconies that may or may not be similar in the area. What other similar balconies on similar sort of properties have we got in this in this sort of locale?
I don't have a detailed record of them, but there are other balconies. Obviously, it's a waterfront location, so obviously balconies are a popular option, and they have been approved in various locations along this waterfront.
Finally, just so that I'm clear, the balcony that we're talking about would be an extension of where that photograph was taken from. So that blue railing that we can just see at the bottom in the foreground would go, and you'd be able to walk further out above, in essence, above those few trees that we can see there, to the left of the heavy blue screen.
The blue railings that you can see would stay there on a lower level, so it would be just sort of projecting forward at this level.
Thanks.
Just to explain who I've got to speak, it's now the vice chair. Then it's Nick. I've got you down, but I'm going to take Councillor Spalding first, then you, then Councillor Morris. So can we have vice chair, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was really open-minded about this application. I was confused as to why it came to committee, although there's a very, very high level of public support or public people against this. But I was really glad I went on the site visit yesterday because it was incredibly useful because you don't get the true answers to the questions from just these visual aids, these pictures. We were lucky to have access to both the properties, and on first inspection, the view from the applicant would be absolutely fantastic, a really beautiful panoramic view. However, they do have another balcony above that they could utilise for that same view. We then went into the neighbouring property, and what was really good, actually, I've not seen this done before, was they have actually erected a sort of a screen to demonstrate the impact this balcony is going to have on their lives. And looking out, it suddenly became apparent to me that stood on their current little balcony from the kitchen, if they stand up, they won't be able to see at all to the left-hand side because of the suggested obscure glazing. They won't be able to see their children coming home from school, visitors arriving. So I don't think it actually presented a positive contribution, and it definitely sort of upset, the visual outlook. So with that in mind, I'm really completely sympathetic to the objectors and their views, because the things that Mr. Banks said in his speech, especially about the fact they are not going to be able to see the left-hand side at all, and if that's the way the sun goes down, the sun sets, etc. So I actually don't feel I can really support this application at this time.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm going to take Councillor Sparling, followed by Councillor Kelly, and then by Councillor Morris. Councillor Stevens after that.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I've studied the PAP very carefully, and I listened with lots of care and attention to the speakers. I didn't go on the site visit like you, Maddie, but just from the PAC and what I've heard, I also can empathise and sympathise very much with the objectors. But empathy and sympathy isn't why we're here, and it's not really a planning consideration as such, much as we'd perhaps like it to be at times. So I'm struggling on that basis to find grounds upon which we could actually justify rejecting that which would stand up to scrutiny at an appeal, if I'm honest. Although I would say I was somewhat taken aback by the comments from Mr. Boot referencing a speculative additional story, a point it seems to me is largely, if not completely, irrelevant to this particular application. But that's what I'm currently thinking. The MPPF has a presumption for sustainable development. It does sound as if the applicant has been working with planning in post-refusal discussions from the previous application. So really that's what I'm currently thinking, and I wanted to share that with colleagues. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. From my point of view, I don't know if other committee members are feeling the same. It's quite a difficult decision, this, because on the one hand, Mr. Boot has gone back to the planning authority and made the amendments in line with guidance that he's been given, so he's been seen to perhaps be cooperative. But equally, the reasons for declining or refusing in the first instance, in my mind, haven't fully been overcome. So 2 metres was too big, 1.5 is okay. Yes, he's withdrawn the lower balcony, but as has been pointed out, any design, when an architect puts it together, is the best he feels for that particular site and cost analysis. And that doesn't mean that you can't improve on an architecture. But the bit that's resonating with me is they have been specifically designed that you can benefit the 180 views from the Juliet balcony. But equally, if you go on to the higher level, all current residents of Shoreway can have an uninterrupted view as well. And it would seem that putting this balcony on, from what we've heard and from your own admission, Mike, it will have a detrimental effect on people's amenity and the neighbourhood. And we've, don't bow to people pressure, but there's a lot of residents that have come with valid concerns. And I think that's why we're here at committee, to try and take on board and reach a balanced decision. So the point that Councillor Sparling made, with regards to permitted development, and I appreciate this is slightly different from the application, but was the applicant in effect saying, I need planning permission for the balcony, which you've conditionally granted, but under permitted development, I could put a single-storey extension on that would have a far greater change of the street scene, be it detrimental or not. So that is my question to you, Mr. Stone, please.
I don't know if that was what he was saying, but he's correct in stating that he could, under permitted development rights, build 3 metre deep, 4 metre high rear extension without planning permission, yes.
Right. I think it's a consideration, but we're dealing with what we've got here today. Councillor Morris, then Councillor Stevens, and then I'm going to move to some sort of conclusion, please.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. Looking at the picture there, the existing Juliet balcony, how far does that project out from the back of the building?
And that's 600 millimetres.
secondly, we talk about balconies on poles being within or out with the character of the area. And obviously the definition of what the area is a movable feast. Are there any balconies similar to this with or without poles on any of the other buildings in Shore Way?
Not in Shore Way, no.
And then it seems to me that the key thing for me is about this thing about the privacy screen and the side view from number 59. What's the height of that privacy screen? I mean, are we talking something knee-high or head-high? Or?
Do you have that information, Mike?
It starts at 1.9 metres and goes down to 90 centimetres after it starts going down to 90 centimetres at its lowest point after 1.2 metres.
Sorry,
So-
if I were looking
Okay,
from back window, sorry, the back window at number 59,
Yeah.
I can see the new balcony at number 58.
Yeah.
What height, as I look out,
Okay, so that
is the privacy screen there?
it's 1.9 at the maximum, and after 1.2 metres, it starts to go down to 90 centimetres at its lowest point there.
Okay, Councillor Stevens.
Thanks. It's very common for us, obviously, to have a planning application where the applicant is in favour, but many of the surrounding neighbours are understandably against. That's commonplace. We're used to that. Our job, I think, is to cut through what I might hopefully respectfully call the emotional arguments, which I don't dispute or downplay or deny the sincerity of. But we're not here to take on board emotional arguments. We're here to look at planning facts. So I would caution against some of the comments that the Vice Chair made in terms of looking out for school children coming home and so on. I'm not sure, much as I would like to have that enshrined, I'm not sure where that exists at the moment. I would ask, on the similar vein, taking Johnny's point, Peter, can you perhaps tell us, because it's all hinging on this view and outlook and all the rest of it, in planning terms, the neighbours who are most affected, which are obviously the people at number 59, what is it in planning law, on planning terms, which is what we're here to judge, that people are entitled to in the way of views, outlook, and so on, that need to be or could be protected by us? And what are, for want of a better phrase, nice views aesthetically, but don't enjoy protection in the planning system?
Okay, yes. So nobody is entitled to a view in planning terms. That's the key issue. There's obviously the protection of strategic views throughout the city, but as an individual, a reason for refusing a planning application can't be that somebody who currently has a nice view loses that view. However, a planning consideration is outlook. So if the outlook is affected, and obviously with the balcony next door with a privacy screen, there is an effect on someone's outlook, not someone's view, but someone's outlook from the balcony. Also, there's the issue of privacy. If you consider that there is a loss of privacy, obviously we've talked about, there's obviously views into the garden because everybody has a balcony, so everyone can look out. Whether you consider that privacy is diminished further for the neighbour through this balcony, and also issues of the character, which has already been mentioned. Obviously, we got views of the terrace, and whether you think that actually that balcony is actually out of character with the surrounding properties. So yes, so you couldn't refuse it because a view was being lost by the neighbour.
Okay, the Vice Chair has indicated me she wishes to speak, so...
Thank you, Chair. Bill, I just wanted to make an example.
Sorry, Councillor Dan. Can I take Councillor Dan
yep.
first? Sorry. Yep, thank you.
So, Peter, if you're going through those letters of objection, what about precedent then? Because precedent has been set on other properties, even though they are commercial properties rather than domestic properties in the area. Is that a planning refusal?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, precedent can be used in a way for planning decision. However, in this instance, I would say that balconies in other locations, the balconies are looked at on their own merits for that particular location. So obviously, if there was a balcony, if this balcony was approved, and next door wanted to have a very similar balcony, then you could use that as a planning reason, say, well actually that balcony has been accepted, so on that basis it's reasonable to suppose that the neighbour could have a similar balcony. However, if you're looking at balconies which are outside of that immediate locality, then you have to look at the particular circumstances of where that balcony is located, not just say because there's been a number of 2 or 1.5 metre balconies being approved elsewhere in the city, that in itself isn't a planning consideration in my view.
Just follow up then. So has this been put in then because of the height of the balcony from ground floor, which I presume is the bottom of the wall? So if it had been a balcony on a property that the ground floor was actually at ground level, would they still have had to put in for planning permission? Because the ground floor is much lower than the wall, isn't it? Is that where ground... Do you know, because the house goes like that, doesn't it?
I mean, Mike's a better expert at permitted development rights than I am, but certainly, I mean, some development could have been undertaken without planning permission. If it's a rear balcony, a rear balcony would require planning permission.
Okay. Right. Vice Chair, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. During the debate, I've actually had a little scan through my core strategy here, and following on from what Councillor Ken Foster said, I've actually looked at policy CS34, and I'd like to actually propose that we refuse this application in line with policy CS34. Specifically, numbers 3, 4 and 6. 3, I don't believe it positively contributes or makes a positive contribution. 4, specifically the visual impact, and 6, the neighbour outlook.
Okay, Peter,
or the outlook.
Yeah.
Is that?
Are you clear on that?
Yes, that's that makes sense based on the discussion that we've had today, yes.
It's been seconded by Councillor Pagelli.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say,
Yeah.
I'd just like to support what Councillor Bridgman has just said, and I will second the to refuse the application.
Right. Okay, everybody clear of the proposition by Vice Chair seconding. Councillor Morris, did you wish to speak?
Can I just be clear, because there is a proposal to refuse. If I want to refuse and agree with Councillor Bridgman, I should press my green button. Is that correct?
Yeah, you'll be voting in favour of the resolution to refuse, if that's my understanding of it. Yeah, is that correct? That's what I think. Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to move to the vote, and everybody's aware of that. So, you ready for that? 20 seconds. The vote is 7 votes in favour, 6 votes against. Therefore, the application or the resolution to refuse is passed. So the application is refused. Okay. Thank you. That brings us on to application 62 Pearson House, Mulgrave Street. I will just, can I just clarify to members of the committee, Simon Osborne, the case officer, is unfortunately unable to attend to this meeting today. So Peter Ford will be acting as the case officer on this particular application. Is everybody clear on that? Okay, thank you. All right. Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. As I say, unfortunately Simon Osborne can't be here today. I will give you a short presentation because obviously you've got a comprehensive report in front of you. I've also got Mike Stone here to help me with the slides. The application before you is for Pearson House. As you are aware, this application has previously been approved by Planning Committee. What is before you today is a Section 73 application, which is amendment to conditions. There is a very detailed report. The level of detail is in response to the issues that have been raised during the application process. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through all those issues because obviously you've got those in the report, but obviously I'm happy to explain them further if you wish. But just to give you an outline of the application itself, the key changes which are put forward as part of this Section 73 application is a reduction in the footprint of the property by 20%, with a flank elevation depth reduced by 4.5 metres. There are also changes to the elevation and floor plans, a removal of the attic recess on the side elevation, and increase in window and door sizes. There is also proposed to be a change of mix of residential units. Originally, with the original application, there was 50 two-bed units and 26 one-bed units. The revised scheme is for 40 two-bed units and 36 one-bed units. So it's the same number of units, but a different mix between 2 and 1 bedrooms. Also, there was alterations to the landscaping, and also a reduction in the parking from 39 spaces in the approved plan to 33 spaces. And I do apologise, in the report it makes reference to 32 spaces, it's actually 33 spaces. And also a change of the location of the bin store from the west side to the east side. During the application and following a number of objections which were raised, amendments were made to this application, and they are summarised as such. And I'll show these on slides in a minute. Basically, a reinstatement of some of the detailing on the front with a horizontal band, a removal of attic projection, additional cladding on the ground side elevations. The side balconies were removed from the side elevations. There was a reinstatement of trees and seating in the front of the development, and also additional landscaping to the rear, and also minor changes to the parking. So if we can just look at this slide, so if you take it to the next slide, thank you, Mike. This slide basically shows you, the top one is the originally consented scheme. Below you will see marked in red is a change in the footprint, and as you can see from the south, the footprint of the building has moved back by 4.5 metres. If you go on to the next slide, please. Here there's it's difficult to see from these slides, but basically the top one is the originally approved scheme. The scheme below just shows changes to the design of the north-facing elevation, as outlined earlier. Go on to the next slide, please. And this is taking you to the east elevation. Again, just showing you that there is a reduction in the size and moving back by 4.5 metres. Next slide, please. Now, this one's quite difficult to see on this slide, but from the north elevation, but you can see from the top there is a setback on the western elevation of a setback on the top level. The applicant has, if we go on the lower one, there's not so much of a setback in the revised scheme, but there is still a setback on the northern elevation itself, which is difficult to see from that particular slide. And then going on to the next slide, this shows the landscaping. As you can see, at the front, just go to the north side, which would be top. Mike, sorry, that's it. There is still the landscaping which was proposed from on the left was the original approved scheme, and on the right is the amended scheme. There is still the landscaping to the front along Knott Street. What was missing in the original application was landscaping to the rear. That's been introduced with the revised scheme, and as you can see, because the building is moved forward, there is more space for this landscaping. And then going on to the next slide, this just gives you a visual view of what the landscaping along Knott Street is proposed to be. Obviously, that would be conditioned. Going on to the next slide again. These give you a visual indication of what the buildings would look like. Key thing to look at here between the left and the right, and the revised scheme, the bulk of the building is lower, is reduced because it's moved back by 4.5 metres. And then going on to the next slide, this basically shows the setback on the western elevation, which is missing on the revised scheme. And then finally, from comparative images, this just shows you the view along Knott Street, and as you can see, there's some differences. For example, with the additional cladding on the revised scheme. If you just show that on that elevation, that's right. Then I've got the floor plans here, which I won't go into any detail, but obviously I'm happy to go back to those if you wish after the presentation. And then finally, I've got some photographs showing you the view of the site as it stands today. So this is the front of Pearson House from Princess Way. And the next slide is looking towards Lockyer's Quay. I think you're all familiar with the site. The next one is the rear of the building, and then after that is the rear and part of the garden. Then the rear of Alfred Street, and then Athenaeum Street, and then the rear of Athenaeum Street, and then finally on the east side. There have been, as I mentioned, a large number of representations, and there have also been objections from statutory consultees. The Hone Neighbourhood Forum is now a statutory consultee, and they objected to the scheme. Also, Historic England objected. A number of these objections, officers feel, have been addressed through the amendments to the scheme, as you will see in the report, but I will just highlight to you some of the outstanding issues which are still felt to be an issue from the objectors. So first of all, there's still objections to the design and the impact of the development to the conservation area. There's objections to the reduction in the car parking. There's also objections to the number of one-bed units, the tenure mix. There is also an issue which has been raised with a difficulty for refuse lorries to collect the bins with the new location of a bin store. There was issues regarding the rear terrace being a fire hazard, and also for access for emergency vehicles. There is a query over the viability of the scheme and whether further Section 106 contributions could be provided from the revised scheme. And there's also privacy concerns raised. There has been an addendum report. Before I say that, I've put up this other slide, which actually has been produced by Historic England, which they've allowed us to use, just to indicate levels of harm. Historic England objected to the first application. They are still objecting to this application. When we get objections from Historic England, we get it in terms of, from the MPPF, in terms of the level of harm. With regards to the Historic England's right to refer the application to the Secretary of State, that comes down as substantial harm. And if Mike, if you just point to the very last one, that's right, substantial harm is the last part in that dial. Historic England are not saying that there is substantial harm with this application. However, they have used the term serious harm. And that basically means they feel it is harmful to the conservation area, but not so harmful as to constitute substantial harm. So they are using the National Planning Policy Framework terminology in that. There was an addendum report, and apologies, it's quite a long addendum report. The reason for that is because there was a further round of consultation and a number of other issues were raised. There are further issues raised with regards to highways, and I would like to point you towards the amended Condition 13, which we are suggesting is included if members are reminded to approve this application today. There was also an issue raised very late with regard to assisted living parking issues. Basically, there is in the application, some of the units will be built to Lifetime Homes standards, and the query was why wasn't there a wheelchair accessible parking space. Now, I have actually just checked that with our building control colleagues. This isn't a planning matter, it's a building control matter primarily. However, for it to meet the building regulations, there is a requirement for one wheelchair accessible space. So what I am suggesting, if I may, Chair, is to avoid, this would be a minor change to the plans. For if you were minded to approve this application today, we would want to seek a minor change by the applicant to make one of those existing parking spaces into a wheelchair accessible space to overcome that particular issue. There were also issues with regard to loss of wildlife, loss of daylight and ventilation of undercroft parking, which again is outlined in the addendum report. Thank you very much.
Okay. The recommendation is to grant.
And so the recommendation is to approve.
Okay. Right. We have three speakers on this particular application. First is Councillor Penbarthy, who is speaking as Ward Councillor. Councillor Penbarthy, would you like to come down? Welcome to the committee, Councillor. I'm sure you know the format, that you have 5 minutes to address the committee. We remind you 1 minute before the end of that period. So whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I hadn't expected to be back in front of you talking about Pearson House so soon on behalf of ward colleagues and the residents we represent. I know that we're not here today to contest the permission already given by this committee, although clearly the objections of local residents and councillors to the scheme remain. This application, as you've just heard, changes, amongst other things, the mix of properties, the footprint, elements of the design, parking provision, and positioning of services already granted. Not an insubstantial list. Given the sensitivities of the site and its planning history, I am amazed that the developer has chosen not to consult direct with local residents or councillors before or during the development and timing of this application process. Clearly, such a lack of engagement flies in the face of the practice we as a council expect. I'm also concerned that the changes proposed have not managed to change the serious harm that Historic England say that this will cause the conservation area, almost serious enough to mean referral to the Secretary of State. You'll be hearing in a minute from Mrs. Bray, a local resident, about local resident concerns regarding this application. These concerns and objections are ones with which we as ward councillors have total sympathy. But I would like to raise two specific areas of concern with you and leave you with a request relating to each of these. I note that during the planning process on this application, the applicant has provided on an ongoing basis updates and new drawings. Some of these have been fairly major, all have lacked annotation of changes, and this has caused confusion for local residents trying to understand what is happening. Additionally, some of these drawings were only published last week, less than 14 days before this committee meeting, and 14 days is our own standard time for consultation response. Surely, trying to fit an application into a meeting timetable should not deprive residents of the ability to carefully consider late submissions from the applicant. I would ask that on this basis, the committee defer the decision until there is a clear 14-day period between the last published materials from the applicant and the date of the committee meeting, rather than a decision being made during what would normally be an active consultation period. Members, the applicant is proposing reducing the size of the building without reducing the number of properties. They're proposing making the building easier and cheaper to build. Yet we are still not getting policy-compliant affordable housing contributions. I would ask that should you be minded to approve the application today, you amend the Section 106 condition to include an overage clause based on value of sale and profit to ensure that at a time of sale, the council achieves a contribution as close to our policy as possible. I would also ask that you ring-fence Section 106 off-site affordable housing contribution to provision of new affordable homes in the St Peter and the Waterfront ward. This would be in keeping with the precedent you have set on a number of sites when applying these conditions, including recently in the Linden Homes Mill Bay proposals.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Penbarthy. Next speaker we have is Miss Amelia Bray. Where are you? Would you like to come down and address the committee? Welcome to the committee. I'm sure you realise you have 5 minutes to address and we will remind you a minute before that time, in your own time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you read the article in the Herald last Friday, you may be wondering why you're here. Apparently the decision's been made. We're merely paying lip service to the democratic process. That is not the case. This may be your last opportunity as elected representatives of the people of Plymouth to acknowledge the importance of this development site. This plot is not only within the Hoe Conservation Area, but it is surrounded by streets that predate Elliott Terrace and the Grand and has been described in application documents as being among Plymouth architects Falston's best set pieces. Flanked by around 70 Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed properties, it sits in the city centre's only remaining Georgian terraces. The planning officer's report may state that it is on the boundary of the conservation area, but it is within the conservation area. And a boundary is a boundary enshrined in law and not to be moved at the convenience of the planners. In 2015, you rejected the application, which Historic England claimed would cause substantial harm to the conservation area. In 2016, it was approved, following the loss of 2 stories and the top story width reduction to make the building appear as if it was only 6 floors. Promoted by the developers as a quality building, Historic England reduced its objection to one of harm. The developer claimed a smaller building would not be viable. Well, in 2017, here we are again, and you are being asked to approve what has been categorised as a minor amendment, which reduces the size and, more importantly, the quality of the building, which, despite previous claims to the contrary, is now said to be viable. The Hoe Neighbourhood Forum letter of objection details why this summary is not wholly accurate. The most significant alteration is that the top story has now increased to the full width of the building. The front elevation has lost its curved aspect, changes which have led Historic England to raise their objection again to one of serious harm. There are more than 40 changes to the approved plans, yet a summary statement has not been included, and we have been left to play spot the difference. Among the more concerning changes are the movement of the curbside refuse collection to the east side. There are currently permit parking spaces which would preclude this, and no residence parking is shown on Mulgrave Street West. We were assured that there would be no loss of residence parking, but the developers clearly believe this not to be the case. Additionally, the reinstatement of a full-width top story will greatly infringe privacy and overshadowing of neighbouring properties. At previous committee meetings, there have been heated debate as to the developers' claims regarding public consultation. This time, there can be no argument that no attempt was made to engage with local residents, which, given that a reduction in size can now be viable, it would have been pertinent to involve the community in addressing the worst and most contentious issues, such as the mere 7-metre separation between the east wall and the residents of Lockyer Court, the height of the building, and the lack of a vehicle loading bay. The lack of detailed reports is listed in the letter of objection from the Hoe Neighbourhood Forum, and by particular reference to drawings 160 and 170. This development will never be a landmark building in a key strategic site. It will never enhance the conservation area. It will be another long-term blight on our city for short-term gain. What will your legacy be to Plymouth? I urge you not to base your decision on inaccurate and incomplete applications for what amount to significant changes, but to defer discussion until a full, accurate application is submitted and statutory consultees' questions satisfactorily answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Briggs, for your contribution. We now have Mr. Paul Mapstone, who is speaking in support of the application. Good afternoon, Mr. Mapstone. Welcome to the committee. I'm sure you're fairly familiar with the format. There's 5 minutes. We remind you 1 minute before the end of that time. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for allowing me to speak to you on behalf of this planning application today. My name is Paul Mapstone of Burke Rickards Architects, and we were appointed by the applicant to design the proposals before you today. In November of last year, planning permission was granted for the development of 76 1- and 2-bedroom apartments on this important city centre site. Following this approval, our client requested that we investigate how the scheme could be amended to positively address some of the concerns raised by residents at the previous planning committee, whilst retaining the financial viability of the scheme. To this end, we identified an opportunity to reduce the depth of the building by nearly 5 metres, creating a greater distance between the development and the neighbouring properties behind, whilst also reducing the overall footprint by approximately 20%, to further improve the perceived scale and mass of the proposals. By doing so, this minor amendment application seeks to change the residential mix from 26 one-bed apartments and 52 bed apartments to 36 one-bed apartments and 42 bed apartments, resulting in a net loss of 10 bed spaces for the development, but increasing the rear amenity space by approximately 70%. The loss of bed spaces is offset by a reduction in build costs to ensure the viability is consistent with the previously approved scheme, albeit delivering a development that responds positively to some of the concerns raised over the consented scheme. Whilst the design has had to change slightly as a result of these amendments, the general architectural treatment remains as approved, and the use of high-quality, durable materials is identical to that of the approved scheme. By reducing the depth of the building and changing the residential mix, the layouts for each of the apartments has been improved significantly to ensure the living standards of future occupants is enhanced, securing the success of this development for residents of Plymouth. With such a reduction in bed spaces, the design allows for the living accommodation to be afforded greater access to natural light, with rooms less deep in plan and greater private amenity afforded to each dwelling. In addition to these practical changes, due to the reconfigured ground floor resulting from the requirement to provide suitable provision for bin stores, cycle storage and maintaining effective visibility displays, the car park has been amended to provide 33 car parking spaces. With a revised emphasis towards a balanced development of 1 and 2 bed apartments, there will be a consequential reduction in vehicular traffic around the site. Taking on board the concerns of residents voiced at the previous planning committee, the applicant and our design team has worked in close consultation with officers to ensure the minor amendment proposals before you today help significantly towards addressing these concerns. Whilst affordable housing contributions have been agreed by way of off-site commuted sum, these apartments are specifically aimed at individuals, couples and small families on relatively low incomes to enjoy convenient, good quality housing, close to places of work, public transport and the necessary amenities for modern city living. We trust councillors will agree these minor amendments to the approved scheme will not only provide a more successful development to meet the needs of local residents, but also provide a built form that responds positively to this important city centre site. Not only has the building been reduced in scale by 20%, it is now sited further away from neighbouring properties, helping to alleviate the concerns residents raised previously in relation to privacy and overdevelopment of the site. In closing, we are confident the design proposals before you today represent a notable improvement on the approved scheme. This development will deliver a quality landmark building for a forward-thinking city, which provides much-needed quality residential accommodation in a highly sustainable location, as well as providing significant investment in the form of skilled construction employment. Thank you, and substantial Section 106 contributions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Mapstone. Right, I'm going to throw it open to the committee. I have Councillor Stevens, who's indicated to me wishes to speak. First.
Yeah, thanks very much. I was just struck by something that Mr Mapstone said in his remarks, that these changes had been brought forward to address and alleviate the concerns of local people. I would have said the success of whether or not it does address the concerns of local people is to put these changes in front of local people and ask their opinion, rather than just assume, which rather leads me to believe that these changes have not been brought forward to alleviate and address the concerns of local people. Maybe I'm being uncharitable, but that's where the evidence points me. I think had the applicant sat down with local people and their ward councillors, we may have different proposals in front of us today, but ones that, if not had the support of local people, at least had their acceptance. which is something that I know I always tried to champion as chair of this committee, and you've taken a very, very similar view, Kevin. So I am very, very disappointed with where we are. Specifically, could we have a bit more on the car parking, both in terms of the reduction and the changes to the availability of the residents' parking scheme, which I think Ms Bray mentioned in her comments, please, whoever's available to do
Very,
that.
very valid question, Councillor Stevenson. Can I ask Gary Lester from the Transport Department to comment on that, please?
The development is in a city centre location, so in accordance with policy, there is no absolute requirement to provide car parking. There's no absolute requirement to provide car parking. In this case, because the footprint of the building's changed and the arrangements in the basement, access position and refuge collection areas have all been moved around. As a result of that, we've lost further car parking spaces. The loss of car parking spaces, as I said, is not really a problem because we don't require any necessarily to start off with. So reduction in car parking in itself is not an issue. The arrangement of the parking is more of an issue, that they have parking, that it's practical. One of the issues was that they repositioned the entrance to the car park, and not only repositioned it but narrowed it. And the concerns in doing that was just to be able to establish that a car could still get in and out of the basement car park, particularly since on the opposite side of the road there are car parking bays, on-street parking bays. So to demonstrate that that was feasible, we asked the applicant to provide wheel tracking plans for a car entering and leaving the basement car park, which they did. In terms of the refuge storage was initially on the west side of the building, as we know, with access from Athenaeum Street. And that's where it was for Pearson House, and it was serviced by the waste vehicle reversing up through Mulgrave Street West to pick up the waste. In this proposal, what's effectively happened is it's been swapped to the other side of the building. So basically, it's the opposite hand to what we have at the moment. So it would mean that a waste lorry would have to reverse in from Lockyer Street to pick up the waste. The movement would be the same, just simply opposite hand. We've consulted with our waste people down at Prince Rock Depot, our street services, collection department, and asked them if they feel that it's possible to collect waste from the bin store on the opposite side of the building. And they've confirmed that it is. It isn't desirable, but it is a practical option. And the same was true, of course, of the position of the previous bin store on the west side of the building, because the vehicle still had to reverse in. So the view of the waste department was the same, that it wasn't desirable, but nonetheless, it was a practical option. In terms of waste collection, there's various guidance on that, particularly building regulations, and it does meet that guidance. The vehicle can get within 25 metres of the collection point. So just as before, it still meets the relevant guidance and still could be effectively serviced. So in terms of servicing and parking, we're satisfied that it would continue to function, or would be able to function, as well as the extent permission, the consent, I should say. So in that respect, we haven't come across any real concerns that the applicant hasn't subsequently addressed. And it is set out in some detail in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks.
Did you want to come back on?
Yeah, if with your permission, Chair. You didn't touch if you refer to this, apologies, Gary, but there were some comments from one of the speakers about reductions in the on-street residents' parking availability. I don't know if you specifically put it in those terms, but if this were to go ahead, would there be any material changes to the availability of residents' parking bays or spaces?
Thank you, Chair. No, there wouldn't. I'm sorry that I overlooked that point that you made. There wouldn't be any changes to the on-street parking layout. Residents have expressed concerns for two reasons, as far as I can tell, in the main. One is because there is a tracking diagram that was submitted by the applicant, which showed a wheel tracking plan of the car using the basement car park and extending out of the entrance down along Mulgrave Street and into Mulgrave Street West, whereupon the track shows it running through what is existing car parking spaces. Any car driving down that street past existing Pearson House even, and making a left turn into Mulgrave Street West, would have a similar track to follow, and it might follow a wider or a tighter track depending on the situation, depending on whether there was a car parked in the last bay or not. The point is, any car using that street would have to make that left turn at the bottom of Mulgrave Street into Mulgrave Street West. The tracking plan need not have shown that track, and the fact that it does is immaterial because the parking bays are there and they will remain there. It's not necessary to remove those bays to assist that left turn, which already occurs. One of the other concerns in terms of parking bays was the impact on the parking bays on the east side of the building as a result of the bin store being moved over to that side. Because there are parking bays outside the bin store, that's acknowledged. And again, there's been a suggestion that they would need to be removed. Again, they would not be removed. They would stay as they are. And the waste vehicle would reverse up through that side, the east end of Mulgrave Street. The waste bins would be moved out onto the highway and emptied from there. We would need to provide drop crossing points, and they would be provided, and it's mentioned in the addendum, just beyond where the existing car parking, on-street parking bays are currently. So there would not be any removal of any on-street parking. And indeed, if we were to remove on-street parking, we would have to go through another public consultation process. And I suspect it would be wholly unpopular. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, finally, yes, yeah, I appreciate that. I suppose it's a question to Peter in Simon's absence. Did the applicant make the same point to us that these proposals were being brought forward to address the concerns of local people? And if they did, presumably we asked the question, how have you tested that with local people before getting to this stage?
Peter?
Okay, yeah, I do apologise. I wasn't involved in those early meetings, but I am aware that the applicant has chosen to make this amendment. I mean, I know there was an issue about the mix of 1- and 2-bedroomed properties, but I'm also aware that through previous discussions that they had mentioned particularly about moving the building forward. So the 4.5 metre.
I'm really sorry, that's not my question. Did we, either someone in the local planning authority, say to the applicant, have you spoken to local people about this, or words to that effect?
Sorry, I did not have that information. So, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Morris.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, whose decision is it that this can come under a Section 73 application as opposed to it being a new application? At what stage do minor changes become a new application? Because this seems fairly major difference to me. Okay,
a Section 73 application must involve a change in conditions, either removal of conditions or varying conditions. If there is a a change in the description of the development, or if there is a change in the red line of the development, the application, then it cannot be dealt with under a Section 73 application. So, for example, if the number of dwellings changed from, which is 76, to a different number, it would require a new application. If, in this instance, the changes are related to changes in the plans, and they are dealt with under conditions, and there's a conditions plan in the original consent, that can be dealt with under Section 73. So there are specific rules which are followed, and in officers' view, this falls under the requirements of Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act.
Do you want to come back, Chris? More?
Yeah, I've got loads more. Subsequent to that, or consequent on that, what difference is there in what type of consultation and for how long has to be done for a planning application as opposed to a Section 73 variation? And further, what consultation, picking up on Councillor Pember, these points, has actually been done?
Okay, right. A Section 73 application grants a new consent. So it is a new planning consent that is granted. Because of that, it falls under exactly the same rules for consultation as any other planning application. That means there needs to be a statutory 21-day public consultation period. That involves, that falls within our publicity protocol of putting site notices up and this instance publication in the paper. When further amendments are made, which I think you're alluding to, then it is up to the local authority what further consultation is carried out, depending on the significance of that. So there's no statutory requirements. You don't have to reconsult for 21 days. You actually don't have to reconsult at all if a local authority feels it's not expedient to do so. In this instance, there was a further 14-day consultation period because of the changes that were made. In our view, as officers, these changes improved the position and addressed at least some of both the consultee concerns and also the public's concerns. But with regards to whether we needed to do that or the period of time we needed to do that, there is nothing in the statutory process that requires us to do so.
One more point. You can come back later, but I've got to move on to other people as well. Go on.
In which case I'll keep to this point then. In terms of us deciding on this application then, clearly the original planning permission granted is extant. So in the event that this is refused, it reverts to the, no, fine. It's just because for me, in consideration of this in terms of the variations compared to the original one, which I spoke on, and there are pluses and minuses, and were this to be an original application, I might have to look at it differently. So, for instance, the loss of the curved frontage. I mean, I consider, I respect the views of the people who live nearby, and I know the area well, and the Georgian Terrace, but one of the key considerations for me last time was actually the frontage onto Knott Street. And the lack of symmetry in this variation, and the not having the top floor setback and having the curved frontage gone is considerably detrimental to this, I think. On the other hand, the moving of it 4.5 meters, whatever, to the north is a benefit. And so, am I completely correct in saying that we either accept or refuse these variations as a whole, or the original application remains in force.
Peter?
Okay, just to clarify one point, just to make sure it's absolutely clear to members. With regards to the setback, there is still a setback on the top floor on the northern elevation. It is just on the side elevations where the setback has been just so you're clear. So there is still, so when you're looking up, basically coming up from the car park upwards, for Princess Way, I think it's called, there is still a setback. So it's just on the side elevations, just to be absolutely clear. And with regards to what's before you is a new application. So if you want to refuse the application, you refuse the whole application. You can't just refuse part of it. And obviously, if this application was refused, then the original application still stands. So it would then obviously the applicant could come back with a revised Section 73 application that still included the parts which you felt was acceptable. But just to be clear, you are refusing the whole application if you refuse it, or you're granting the whole application.
Okay, I have Councillor Riley, and then Councillor Dan, and Councillor Kelly, in that order so far.
Thank you, Chair. I want to come back to something that Councillor Morris did ask, and there was an answer, but I'm only asking again because I'm not completely clear, so I ask you to find out who's best placed to answer this question. I want to go back and revisit Councillor Pemberthy's point about the 14-day consultation. And the reason I want to do that is I wasn't completely clear on the answer you give Councillor Morris. So I won't repeat it as to what I thought you said. Can I just have a real clarification, please, as to the consultation period for a normal application, the consultation period, if any, is required for an amendment or a Section 73, because I'm a little bit confused about where we are with that, to be honest.
I'm going to ask Peter Ford to clarify the clarification.
Okay, and apologies, I wasn't clear enough. We are required, as a planning authority, to advertise this application for 21 days. We advertised it for 21 days. That's the same for this application, a Section 73 application, as it would be for any other planning application. Okay. Then we have discretion as a planning authority if we want to carry out further consultation. There is nothing written down in law what consultation you need to carry out. We make a judgment at Plymouth's Planning Authority that it's dependent on the public interest in doing that at further consultation. We consider that following the number of objections that were made, the applicant addressed not all the issues, but some of the issues. Addressed the issues that we raised as planning officers, as transport officers, and also from members of the public and the consultees. We chose, as a planning authority, to undertake a further period of consultation. Our normal practice on such reconsultation is 14 days. It doesn't have to be. If it's a major change and if we feel actually there is a significant difference, then we could advertise it for 21 days. If it's a very minor application and maybe only involves a couple of neighbours, we might only advertise it, reconsult for 7 days. In this instance, we reconsulted for 14 days. That period of time has elapsed. There is an addendum report that outlines further later consultation responses. So as far as we're concerned, all the consultation was carried out over and above what is required of us.
Are you okay with that, Councillor? No. Okay, Councillor Dan, followed by Councillor Kelly.
Most of my queries have been answered. Can I just ask about emergency vehicles? Was that vehicle tracking done with a fire engine going in and out of that car park? Because there's one thing, you know, having even a large vehicle going in and out of a car park as opposed to an emergency vehicle. That's my first question.
You want to answer that, Kerry, please?
Thank you, Chair. Emergency vehicles and fire engines, such like, can't get into the car park. It's a basement car park, so it's an undercroft type arrangement. So the need, as far as the building regulations are concerned and as far as our policy requirements are concerned, is that a vehicle can get close enough to be able to properly attend any fire. And in this case, it was already considered as part of the previous application, emergency access, in terms of fire engines. How close could they get? Would it be satisfactory? Would they be able to deal with a fire at the site? And the view was that it did meet the requirements, and that was on the application that's already been granted. That situation hasn't really changed because the street layout hasn't changed. So the street layout, Mulgrave Street, that comes in and runs around the back of it, would be unaltered. So it's the same existing situation in terms of large vehicles, fire tenders, getting to that property. So the view is that it was acceptable and it remains acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Down, did you want to come back on?
No, that's fine. And my other question is...
Did you have another question?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, it's just understanding the... I mean, the planning permission has gone through. It's just understanding it's following on from Councillor Morris about the design impact, because I feel as though we're between a rock and a hard place here, in so much as some of the things have improved and taken on board from local residents, but other things have deteriorated. So the design, which is what we're all going to be looking at, and some of the things that was in the original planning application have been dropped, because I'm assuming for cost element. Is that correct?
I don't know if you can answer.
Yeah, can I just say that as part of as the application has progressed, and this is part of the further consultation, some of the design elements, which in officers' view were weaker than the original application, the applicant has agreed to put back. So, for example, the horizontal band across the northern elevation, which we felt was quite an important design. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's quite difficult to see on these slides, but we actually worked with the applicant, and some of those design features which we were not happy with were put back from the original scheme. So there have, for example, the cladding, which again we were concerned about its removal, was put back. So we feel as officers that, okay, when the application first came in, I think, you know, we'd agree, we thought it was a poorer design. We, as officers, felt that with those amendments which the applicant agreed to make, that actually the design was actually improved, or at least equal to the original scheme. But obviously that's a subjective opinion.
Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. As a committee, we've discussed this development site on a number of different occasions, and it's already been alluded to. The scheme, as approved, is the scheme that's been approved. And am I right in the question is, was there an appeal against that initial scheme? And what was the outcome of that appeal, please?
I think maybe there was a review or something.
Just to be clear, if referring to, obviously the application was approved. First of all, the original application was refused. That wasn't appealed, but there was a revised application that came in. That application was approved by planning committee. The local residents, representatives of the local residents, did put forward a judicial review on the process for the determination of a planning application. So it wasn't an appeal, because obviously third parties can't appeal a decision, but there was a put forward for a judicial review. That judicial review was not allowed. And so from a procedural point of view, through the High Courts, the planning authority acted correctly in the way it determined its planning application, but I say it didn't deal with the merits of the application, only the process.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry about the terminology with regards to judicial review, but the point that I'm trying to get across is it's been an emotive site, but if we take on the applicant's views, and I appreciate other councillors might have a different view, one of the concerns was the scaling and mass. We've seen a reduction in the footprint of some 20%. We've discussed at length the parking scenario, the visual impact, and that was all approved prior. So today, what I am slightly surprised about is that residents are still as concerned, bearing in mind from the proposal that seems to be in front of us today, would satisfy a lot of their concerns, i.e. it's been moved, there is a 20% reduction, and from that viewpoint, when I hear about between a rock and a hard place, this has moved in the right direction, I would have thought, for some of the very valid points that have been previously made. So for me, I'm happy to approve this scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Morris, Councillor Spalding, Councillor Few.
Thanks, Chair. Can I return to the refuse issue and the refuse vehicles? Because that, again, is quite a substantial change. All the refuse vehicles that serve Pearson House, and I will reiterate at this point that the existing building there is a pustule on the face of Plymouth, and I look forward to it being replaced. If you are reversing, as we agreed at the last time, down Mulgrove Street West, you're coming off Athenaeum Street, which is a more minor road. I do know the area very well. If one is reversing a refuse vehicle from Lockyer Street, the distance between Lockyer Street and Knott Street is, well, 0. It's the width of a footpath. It's a relatively wide footpath, but it's considerably less than the length of a refuse vehicle. And I don't understand how it is actually physically possible to reverse into the current entrance off Lockyer Street without a large lorry projecting into the main road. I haven't got the tracking diagrams in front of me, but could somebody tell me how you reverse into that entrance?
Well, Councillor Morris, I'm going to ask Harry Lester to comment on that, but I think that, or for me, maybe not for you, they have been consulted, and we've been assured that it's feasible or practical in that. But I will ask Harry to. Peter,
yeah. Can I just? Obviously, I'm not a waste collection expert, but obviously, as Gary stated earlier, we have consulted our waste collection team on this very matter, because obviously they are the experts on it, and it's in the addendum report, page 2, last paragraph. If I can just quote what they say, and then obviously if Gary wants to expand on this, that's fine. The Council's Waste Collection Service has confirmed that although not ideal, the waste collection would be a practical option from the east side of a building as proposed, and the same would apply to fire access. So our waste collection team are saying, okay, it's not ideal, but as Gary says, we're dealing with an existing situation, we're dealing with an existing tight urban form, but the waste collection team are say that it is a practical option as proposed.
Right. Okay, one more question, Councillor Morris.
Sorry, Chair, I shall carry on this.
Well, no,
that is not a sufficient answer. I have no doubt at all that it is physically possible for the refuse collectors to reverse into that entrance. That's absolutely fine. It is, the same three-dimensional Euclidean geometry, that we're all used to. Is it possible to do it, A, legally, B, safely, and C, without the vehicle, while making this manoeuvre, projecting into Knott Street? Have our highways people actually been asked this particular question, as opposed to just the waste collection people?
Well, Gary Lester is the highways officer, and he's assured us that that is the case. Further comment on?
Thank you, Chair. The waste collection is carried out by the City Council, as we know, and they are part of the highway section. So it's one and the same. They come under the same directorate. We have consulted on them. We had a meeting with them. It was very clear what we were discussing with them. And we were assured that they would be able to safely collect waste by reversing in from Lockyer Street. I didn't ask them which way. I mean, how the waste collectors get their vehicle into the street is not something that we would go into. Just to suffice to ask them, is it possible and reasonably safe to service this site? And that was the question. And their answer was, yes, it is. It's not ideal, but they consider that it's a practical option.
Right. Corner Councillor Spolling.
Thank you, Chair. Could I have some clarity, please? And I think it would benefit colleagues. Some clarity on the conservation area. Does this site fall within or out with the conservation area? And I think it would be helpful if we could have a comprehensive answer and not just a
simple.
A comprehensive but simple, not just a yes or no. Thank you.
I'd like to just confirm, as the speaker quite rightly said, the application site falls within the Hoe Conservation Area. It is on the edge of the Hoe Conservation Area, i.e. the boundary of the conservation area is Knott Street. Is Knott Street, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Just in respect of S106 obligations, and in particular the affordable housing obligations, in respect of this application, do any of them fall within, will they fall within St Peter and the Waterfront Ward, is what I'm getting at, following on from the remarks from Councillor Penberthy. Is there anything to mandate that the S106 spend on affordable housing will be within St Peter and the Waterfront Ward?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes, I mean, I'd say the Section 106 requirements are exactly the same as they were from the previous application, and so I will quote from it. It says £130,000 towards the construction of Charles Cross roundabout scheme, and £500,000 towards off-site affordable housing provision. Now, I think, recall when this came to committee last time, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that as with all these off-site affordable housing requirements, which aren't actually on-site, there is a priority given to the ward in which it is placed, or the locality. We have to be very careful with this because there is a 5-year cut-off, and if we don't spend that £500,000 within 5 years, we have to pay it back to the applicant, which obviously as a council we wouldn't want to do. So it is how we use that affordable housing is within the council's own gift. It's within members decide that. There is a priority for St Peter and the Waterfront Ward, but obviously if a scheme does not become available, a suitable scheme does not become available within those 5 years, then obviously it could be used for another scheme within the city.
Thank you. And it's just to sum up, it's more of a general point really in respect of that. Do members really have input actually? And I know this has come up before in respect of the spend in wards and the engagement of ward councillors, but that's perhaps something not for this meeting, but hopefully we'll be able to take that forward more effectively. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tui. All right, we're waiting.
Oh, thank
That's
you,
fine.
Chair. Sorry. Well, I just want to make a comment, really. I note that as regards the design and changes in design of this building, Historic England has moved from harm to serious harm, and I have to say I agree with them. I was also in a hard place because some of the recommendations I could have agreed with quite happily, but contrary to Councillor Kelly, this particular part is more reminds me more to refuse it rather than to accept.
I think we want to clarify the harm and the serious harm.
Sorry, can I just clarify this point? And apologies, I haven't got all the details of the application in front of me. But my understanding is Historic England haven't changed their position. So they have the same position as they did with the original application. I.e., they found that it was harmful in the original application, that they still find that harmful.
Well, in that case, Chair, I still agree with Historic, but rather I still would go for serious harm myself, but certainly harm.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Can we go back to the map, Google Map, although other internet providers are available? Yeah, that'll be fine. That'll be no. Can we find the photo actually? Yeah, that's the one. This refuse access, Gary. You say that both the east and the west access, neither of them are, or both are not ideal. Do they have equal not idealness?
Would you elaborate on that?
Thank you, Chair.
Gary?
Obviously, that would be a judgment call, but I would probably say that there was not a great deal to choose between them in terms of not being ideal. So yes, I would say they were on a par with each other.
Okay. I want to come back to Councillor Morris's question, which I don't think we got an answer to. If we have access on the right-hand side of the map, which is the east access, can you, and if you can come perhaps down to the computer with a cursor, that might help, show me the route that you're saying a refuse lorry would enter that map from, how they would get into a position to select reverse gear, reverse into the lane just below the red car on the main road and come out again.
Right, yep, it's all yours, Gary. Yeah.
So they're not in the map, they're outside of the map at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. This would be the route in.
No, they're not, at the moment, they're not anywhere on the map. They're coming from outside that location. Which, do they come along Knott Street? Do they come along Athenaeum Street? Along Lockyer Street? Which? Because it makes a huge amount of difference. So are we say, is it your view they can approach from any direction to the eastern access? Or do they have to come along Knott Street from one direction or another, or down Lockyer Street, or what?
The honest answer, Chair, is I have no idea. Because refuse collection have routes, and so they'll follow particular patterns.
We're talking about a road safety. I'm not concerned with rubbish collection routes. I'm here to look at road safety or lack thereof. So, are you saying that you, from a road safety aspect, irrespective of whether bins don't get collected, which isn't, forgive me, your purview, are you saying that you would be road safety-wise happy with a huge great bin lorry accessing a reversing route into that lane from any direction on that photo?
Yes, I would say that I would be happy with that. I would say it's not ideal, but I would say it's not unlawful, because those streets are not classified, and so therefore all vehicles, including delivery vehicles, can reverse on those streets and carry out turns. So yes, the situation isn't ideal, but it does occur. It occurs already and will continue to occur.
So if the route is coming north along Lockyer Street, away from the Hoe towards the city centre, how would they, yeah, that's right, how would they get into a position to reverse into the lane?
I think, Councillor Stevens, I think I have to step in here. You've heard from the officer that he doesn't know the route that they would take. It would be up to them. So hypothetically talking about any particular route in isolation doesn't really help our deliberations today. We have to take it from the professional officer that they've been asked if it's practical. And Peter, would you like to come in there at all? But
well, if it helps, I accept your statement on the questions. That's fine. My view is I'll finish a sentence if it kills you.
What's your view?
My view is that to access from any direction, a reverse of a huge great bin lorry into that eastern access would be so dangerous on that traffic light controlled crossing with Lockyer Street and Knott Street to be irresponsible to approve. I don't know how anyone could suggest that that is, and I appreciate the lack of questioning that there has been. I can't support that, I'm afraid.
One more comment on that? Would either Gary or Peter or whatever?
Well, yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say is obviously this new application, the previous application was approved, and so members felt in that situation that the access was acceptable, and so therefore the changes which have been put forward, which officers are saying is equally acceptable, you're disagreeing, but that change from the previous application to this application is materially different.
Possibly with others, but the answer is yes to that, yes.
Well, I think, Councillor Stevens, I accept that you have concerns, and I respect that. I think we're all in the drain scenario where we're deciding whether the drains are right. Well, we've had that on various applications. Well, we have to rely on the professional officer's opinion. And Gary, would you like to just come in?
Thank you, Chair. I would just point out that when we look at these applications, we have to bear in mind the advice in the MPPF. And in terms of transport issues and impacts, it's very clear. It says that we should only be refusing on transport grounds where the impact is severe. It doesn't tell us what severe means or give us a legal definition of severe, but it does say that we should only be refusing on transport grounds where we've established that there is a severe impact. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think that I would just sum up that we need to move to the vote on this. Yeah. Right. Vice Chair. Vice Chair. Yeah. No, absolutely. Go on.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
I just wanted to say, I mean, the thing is, I'm a bit confused and unsure about this. I mean, the amendment is for a smaller footprint, a smaller building. And because of the objections and the public support here today, I'm not sure whether the residents prefer the previous building that will go through pretty much regardless if this one doesn't go through, or whether they prefer this. I know they don't like this one, but the thing is, I've been looking through all my documents here, and I can't actually find a legal reason to turn down this application or to refuse this application. So I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place here.
Well, the application is as before you today. Sorry?
Well, I just thought I could perhaps help Councillor Bridgman. I don't like this at all. I think there is, first of all, a transport grounds. We don't just accept what officers say. We question it, and we have to be satisfied that the evidence to back up their professional opinion exists and has been properly made. Whether it is legally the term is severe traffic impact or not, I don't know. But I am extremely concerned about the change in the access for refuse vehicles from Mulgrave Street to coming off Lockyer Street. I think that is a substantial change, which will have significant impact on the main junction for accessing the Hoe from Knott Street. I think the changes to the frontage, and as I said earlier, my main concern at the last time was about the frontage onto Knott Street, that the changes in the frontage design are much worse than they were before. I think that the treatment of the top story of the original proposal, by being set back on all elevations as opposed to only on 2 elevations, it is substantially better than this. This is a detriment. I think it actually added to the whole nature of the design to have it, if you like, tapering on every side slightly at the top. I thought it softened it. And the same reason that we insisted on, and you know, I'm glad the officers did again, on the maintenance of the line to echo the existing buildings fronting onto Knott Street. And so I think I can answer Councillor Bridgman to say that there are transport issues and very much design issues on which there are grounds to refuse this Section 73 application, which is how I will be voting.
Well, it is your prerogative to vote as you think fit. The application is recommended to grant on page 27. It is my intention to move to the vote. We didn't move. I didn't hear anybody move anything. No. Okay. Right. Okay. So we are moving to the vote. Okay, the result of the vote, as you see, is 8 in favour, 5 against, no abstentions. Therefore, the application is approved. Okay. All right. That brings us on. Item 3 has also been withdrawn. Item 7 is plan applications, decisions issued. You've been circulated a list. Anybody wish to bring anything? No. Item 8, appeal decisions. There are no appeal decisions. Item 9 is exempt business. There is no exempt business. In that case, being no further business, declare the meeting closed.